safeguarding first. We have to do this, but I'm never apologetic for it because it's so important. We all know that. And so some of you have heard snippets of this before. Those of you who've been with us for a while, there's lots of stuff that's in keeping children safe in education that you would have read before, and that's been updated again, so I'm going to bring you those updates. What I'm not going to do is spend time going through every single aspect of safeguarding. We haven't got time for that. But we are going to go through some of the stuff you've seen before, some of the additions in the new Keeping Children Safe in Education, which means, therefore, a reread for everybody on that, but that has to happen. At the end of this session this afternoon, Matt will send out the staff declaration form for you to fill in around safeguards. So please do that, because that is a record we have to keep and present to anybody who wants to question our safeguarding and what we're doing about it. We have to show that everyone's been through the statutory training. So I'm not going to be apologetic. We have to do this, but it's absolutely right, and we're really good at it. We're really good at it. I have to say, that's not blowing anybody's trumpet. We are good at safeguarding. We've got it right. A lot of our students are going through some really sticky situations, and then we're supporting them because of the information you've given to us. So doing this is uber important. So I could spend hours on us discussing what safeguarding is, but Keeping Children Safe in Education haven't changed their definition from last year on it. But if we remember, the first thing that they changed was about the children's mental and physical well-being and health and development, which is really, really important. So it's still those four things: protection, prevention, ensuring that they can grow up in circumstances that keep them safe, and taking action when we know things are going slightly wrong for them, or we're noticing things are going wrong. So that's not changed at all. And just a reminder that children means anybody under the age of 18. Okay, so up to their 18th birthday. School context, safeguarding is all those things we do every day. This is not just about noticing something happen to a child and then reacting to it. This is not just about having a hunch about something. We have to take safeguarding into account in everything we do. So anybody running trips will be thinking about safeguarding. You have to do that. That's what risk assessments partly are for as well. We have to think about it when we're dealing with bullying or intimate safety, or in first aid if there's intimate care of a student who may well have an illness that means that we have to touch and be hands-on. So we have to think about safeguarding everything we do, and that's why I think we are really good at it. It's in that thread the whole time. It's not something that's a bolt on, it's something that we consider, and that's because you're also vigilant with it. This is something I need to remind you about. Extra-familial harms was contextual safeguarding. So if we remember that children might be performing brilliantly at school and there are no concerns, or children may well be have a really stable home life and family background, but it's things we noticed in the context of what's happening to them in a moment that is extra familial to that child that we might need to consider. A good example is a student who's nailing everything else, who's starting to mix with people outside the gate at the end of the school day, that previously may well have been a bad influence, substance misuse. They might have left school and been connected with things we know that aren't great. And that's the kind of harm to that child. So it's taking the context at that moment rather than what their home life's like or how they're performing in school. So it's about looking out for those things as well. So the term extra-familial harm relates to that, and things we'll be coming on to a little bit later. We always need to remember this. This is a key part of Keeping Children Safe in Education. Safeguarding is not child protection alone. It's the prevention, and that's done through curriculum work, RSE curriculums, MSS, tutor times, assemblies, all the things that you deliver on a day-to-day basis. Within your curriculum content as well, it's about promoting well-being through that. So it's an educational-based thing. It's all our responsibility all of the time. We have a DSL team, but it's everybody's responsibility to look out for it, to act upon it, and to support where they can. And we have to assume it happens here, and it does. Across the spectrum of safeguarding things you'll see a little bit later, we probably dealt with 90% of those as a school. Hampshire and Leafy Hampshire is no different to anywhere else. It's just our context is slightly different. We need to always remember that. Okay, just quick hands up. I'm going to throw a few of these in just to break up my waffling, but I'm going to give scenario acceptable or not. So I'll say the scenario, if you think is an acceptable thing to happen, you put your hand up. When I say is it unacceptable, hand up. If you're not sure, you put your hand up too. So, a 3-year-old baby with her parents, acceptable? Yeah, majority. Unacceptable? I'm trying to keep my hand down. I'm not sure. Okay, it is acceptable. There's nothing to say that it's unacceptable. We've probably all been in a situation, those who've had children. but context is important. I'll come on to that a bit later. Mum drops off the children at school, never a seatbelt worn by either child. Acceptable? Unacceptable? Not sure? No, it's definitely not. It's the sort of thing you report straight away. If someone's dropping somebody off the shower first, take the note of the car, we still do, as I say, great responsibility for those children. Child tells you that their parents have a lock on the outside of her door. Acceptable? Unacceptable? Yeah, we don't see you. You're not allowed to lock the children in bed, as tempting as it may be. You are not allowed to do that. Or at least if you do, put a bed in the room so they can get rid of it. No, Alright.
Future reference.
She can go down that route. Okay. Things we have to do, our responsibilities. So, Keeping Children Safe in Education 21 came out at the end of June. They said it wasn't going to come out to mid-August, then gave it out the week after in June. And that informed our safeguarding audit and our child protection and safeguarding policies. So there are adaptations to those. So that's why we have to reread every year, because there's an update and a re-release. So school safeguarding policy, school child protection policy, staff code of conduct and school behaviour policies are all things you need to have read and signed off to say you've read, and they're connected to that document. And you need to be aware of, you can't be aware of if you haven't either been told or read about it, I suppose. But school procedures for children who go missing from education, I'll come on to that. We have to know what they are. You could get asked, but also we need to know to protect children. Role of the designated safeguarding lead, that's obviously me, and those who also identify as the DSLs or deputy DSLs, and that's on the post you'll see around school, and I'll explain about these in a second too. Alright, so that's our responsibilities, things we need to do. If you go to your members area, into the safeguarding area, that's what it looks like on there now in terms of declaration notes. The prevent training, which I need everyone to do because that's been updated as well, and the safeguarding staff declaration link is in there as well. Okay, so non-scenario 3 year 9 boys are looking at pornography in the school library. Is that acceptable? Unacceptable? Yeah, you got it. Okay. Year 8 boys are pinging girls' bras at break time. Acceptable? Unacceptable? Yeah, totally. Everyone's invited last year, totally and appropriately raised awareness of harmful sexual behaviours in school, and we've done a little bit on that already. We did it at the end of last year, but it's absolutely right, and that's a good example of sexual harassment. It's not on. A Year 7 girl sleeps in her grandma's bed with her when she stays over. You've overheard that conversation. Is that acceptable? Unacceptable? Not sure. Okay. Right, this is it. Right, so all of these scenarios have to have some sort of context behind them, don't they? The 3-year-old in the bath with mum and dad, if the 3-year-old says to her key worker at preschool or whatever, nursery, that dad is washing her inappropriately, or she doesn't use those words, but describes that, she might use a phrase that daddy uses in the bath that probably could mean that there's some touching going on. The context all of a sudden for that looks totally different, doesn't it? And so it's always about context, and so that's why we ask questions if we're not sure, and you have to sometimes not investigate, but just give them a chance to explain a little bit more. Okay, so context is important in regards to safeguarding. So all staff should be reading Keeping Children Safe in Education Part 5. That's important. You need to be able to identify children that may benefit from early help, and explain that in a minute. Know about referral processes and social care. That's done by the stickers on the back of your cards or the new cards, and explain that again when I come on to that. Know about school systems supporting safeguarding. Well, you do that because you use them. I'm absolutely confident you know what to do to report concern. We'll go on to local health processes on the next slide. Know what to do if a child is telling you they're being neglected or abused, and know what the signs of those things are. And be able to reassure the victim. This is a new thing from Keeping Children Safe in Education. It's a new line. Make sure that the victims know that they are going to be taken seriously. There's going to be no blame for them and all those sorts of things. So it's really important that we are listening to students, no matter what we feel about what they're telling us, and reassuring them that we're taking this seriously. That's really important. So early help processes is either a school-based intervention, so you identify something nice and early that a student is struggling maybe, or there's a sign that you worry they're being neglected, and school can step in to help. A mentor at school, or perhaps a support from a school buddy, or going to an intervention about anxiety or something like that. Or it could be a multi-agency approach. So you go to someone like the Early Help Hub, who may well help and provide things like family support, or they might provide family classes, parenting classes, those sorts of things, which we can also provide. So that's the early help process. It's that first stage of stepping in and helping out. And we need to be aware what those sorts of things are. And that's done through our interventions here. So if you're aware of what interventions are in place, you can help support by referring them within school in terms of early help. Not assuming colleagues or other professional will take action. We'd all rather be told 10 times that in the same day about a student that's getting something wrong, in terms of, not getting something wrong, is displaying a behaviour that's worrying you, or is withdrawn, or is looking unkempt, or all those sorts of things. And be aware that safeguarding issues can manifest themselves by peer-on-peer harm. That's the key thread through the new Keeping Children Safe in Education. Peer-on-peer harm, sexual harassment, sexual violence. Okay, so what peer-on-peer abuse now looks like are these things. Bullying, including cyberbullying, that's still in there. Abuse in personal intimate relationships, so boyfriend, girlfriend, partners, whatever. We need to be looking out for abuse in personal intimate relationships. So it might appear a consensual thing, but absolutely isn't. Physical abuse, sexual violence and sexual harassment. Sexual violence, I'll come on to a little bit later, but is assault by penetration, rape, sexual harassment, other things that come under that. Upskirting, which was made illegal in 2018, quite rightly so, and it's also now on the list of things that a teacher can be struck off for as well. And initiation, hazing, type violence and rituals, gang initiations, those sorts of things are all peer-on-peer abuse within the new framework. So there are still 4 types of abuse: physical, emotional, sexual, and neglect. I'm not going to spend hours now going through each category of those, because that's in part 1 of Keeping Children Safe in Education. Your reading up on that will inform you a little bit more about what those things are. But in a nutshell, physical, hitting, shaking, smacking, scolding, drowning, all those sorts of things, so it's physical. But also what used to be called Munchausen's by proxy, so it's now called fabricated illness syndrome. So where a parent may well be faking illness within the child, feeding them medicines when they're not actually poorly, keep off school saying they're ill, but there's never a kind of doctor's note that shows that or backs it up. Those sorts of things are considered physical abuse. Emotional abuse, so belittling, excluding a child from family situations, shouting at children, constantly putting them down, and students and children that are exposed to domestic violence and domestic abuse are also under that category now. So sexual abuse, sexting, it can be online, it can be physical. So touching, actions without consent, encouraging students to watch pornography, encouraging students to share images, nudes, dick pics, those sorts of things, all come under the category of sexual abuse. And neglect, not looking after a child's basic needs. So medicine, placing them with people that could possibly harm them, so leaving them with relatives or strangers or friends or whatever that put them at risk, leaving them unsupervised. There's still no cut-off age group for leaving a child home on their own, but obviously it's all about maturity and context with that. But obviously you're not going to leave a young child at home alone, so any sort of those things are neglect as well. So not meeting basic needs of a child. Okay. This is also new and added to, so children with social work attachment, we need to make, as a school, make sure we are a bit more aware of tracking how they're making progress and how well they are in school in terms of well-being. I don't mean we as an individual schools generally. We need to be tracking unauthorised absence, and now any student who has a social worker attached, we need to be immediately jumping on that and chasing it up and informing social workers when children aren't in school. And governors will be making a point of asking about certain students in terms of social worker attachment and their progress. They are a very vulnerable group in terms of being missing education. So, group of symptoms here. Symptoms aren't exclusive to one form of abuse at all. In fact, a lot of them go right across all 4 forms of abuse. But I think it'll be a good opportunity. Some of you have done this with me before, some of you have been through these talks before. I've put a selected amount on there, so I'm just going to give you literally a minute, a break from my voice to have a quick chat about what might be missing in terms of symptoms we see in school that we might be worried about in terms of the child. I'll give you 1 minute exactly, then I'll point rudely at people to shout out something. Okay, off you go. 1 minute. What's missing from that one?
Changing
He's thinking one of them, I find
Last few seconds.
otherwise friends with. Yeah. Stop your tongue. Yeah, like absence, yeah.
Alright. Anybody? No, not that. I did that wrong last time. This table. Anybody on this table? Anything different from that? Okay, yeah, so looking unkempt, unwashed, smelling dirty over a period of time, or if that's changed recently, definitely. All of us just got holes in their elbows, haven't they? But yeah, looking tatty, unkempt, those sort of things. Anything from here?
Is that changing friendship groups?
Yeah, good. Especially if it's a friendship group that you think I've never put them in there and what's going on. Yeah, definitely change friendship groups. Anything here?
Changing behaviours.
Changing behaviours, yeah. So something that's normally spot on, or the other way around, maybe. But normally someone's spot on or something they're not anymore, they're getting it wrong. Definitely. P.
Truancy, actually,
Go on, sorry.
truancy.
Truancy, yes, absence from school. Definitely. So truancy, not wanting to go to certain lessons, maybe not wanting to, coming in late, so punctuality. Especially, again, if a student normally has been pretty good. We'll go one more. On the table.
This is the opposite of withdrawal, so somebody loud as to
Good. Loud and outspoken, yeah, definitely. And it may be well be also expressing views that haven't been before, being outspoken about things that perhaps are extremist in some people's opinion. Okay, so other things on there, multiple phones, definitely an indication of something that's going on. Some now have an extra phone, they've got one to get confiscated, one then to use after that. But all those things on the board are indicators that something is going wrong with the student, and we could be suspicious about that. CSE, child sexual exploitation, CCE, child criminal exploitation, serious violence and county lines, all get a higher profile in the new Keeping Children Safe in Education. You'll read about those when you read part 1. But all those are symptoms of that as well. Children who misuse drugs and alcohol. It could be anything. You've got to be careful about balancing teenage experimentation with what's going on behind that, but it's a concern either way. Children go missing for periods of time or really come home late. Those sorts of things are things that parents might flag to you and say, I'm not seeing them anymore. They're just going out with people, don't know who they're hanging around with, and they're supposed to be in at 9:30, but they're coming in at 10:30. It's when you're having those sorts of conversations that you need to start thinking, all right, I'll just make a note of that, I'll just report concern about those sorts of things. So stick those abuses in the middle of that chart. You've seen this before, and all of those things are things we have to consider. And I think 90% of those are things we've probably dealt with as a school over the last 3 years since I've been here. The only real difference to any of those in terms of how they're dealt with is FGM, and I have to say this to you, and I know all of you probably know this already, but in terms of FGM, female genital mutilation, we have to report that straight to the police because it is a crime. What is FGM? If you don't know, it's the altering or doctoring of female genitalia, and that could be a cultural thing, it could be a tradition, it could be to prevent or punish, but it's illegal in this country. If a child discloses to you that it has happened, then we have to report that to the police, and the person who's received that disclosure has to make that report. Now obviously as a DSL team, we're not going to go, yeah, thanks very much for letting us know, can you go off and make that phone call? We will talk you through that process and sit with you whilst you do that. But you are reporting a crime, so therefore it has to come first hand. And then that follows that process. But please do not investigate, or if they want to show you any of those things, you just, it's an absolute no. As soon as there's a disclosure of it happening, then we report to the police. Suspicion of it about to happen, report to DSL, and we follow through DSL procedures. So this is the big change this year, quite rightly so. So sexual violence and sexual harassment. The umbrella term is harmful sexual behaviours, but these things are now what we have to be really keep an eye on in school, and which is why in your booklets that I gave you at the beginning of the year, there's a whole table about harmful sexual behaviours and how we're going to work and deal with those, and I will urge you just to reread those after this as well, so you know what our processes are as a school. But there is an increasing awareness of it, and there are instances of harmful sexual behaviours, sexual harassment within school. There are. The scenario I gave you earlier about pinging bars is an example of where we've had to deal with that sort of thing. So, you need to know what the difference between the two is. So sexual violence is rape, assault by penetration as defined within the document that we're using. Sexual harassment, unwanted conduct of a sexual nature can occur online and offline. Examples, sexual comments such as telling stories, telling jokes, making sexual banter is on there as well. Making sexual remarks about people's clothing, sexualised names. And then physical behaviour, brushing against someone, touching online. And the word deliberate comes into the spectrum a little bit later. And online harassment, asking for images, those sorts of things. And what we're being encouraged to do is when we're talking to students about even within RSE, and when we're talking to pastorally, one-to-one, we are saying things like dick pics and nudes. We're not saying sexting, and we're not saying youth-generated sexualised images, because they don't talk like that. They don't say, can you send me a youth-generated sexualised image, please? But they might not say please if they say the other thing, but they will say, I'm sending you a dick pic, can you send me a dick pic? Send me nudes. It's kind of regular chat. So we need to talk to them about that. So sexual harassment and sexual violence are the things we really need to be aware of, because that's how we will be spoken to about that. And if any school were to have a visit, that's on the agenda in terms of conversations, those informal conversations walking from A to B about what you do as a school about sexual harassment. Students need to know what we do as a school about sexual harassment. So that's part of that hashtag It's Not Okay stuff that's coming up in the near future. This is what students have said to Ofsted is happening in schools. Again, they go dick pics, nudes, being sent or shown solicited, unsolicited online explicit material such as pornographic videos. And WhatsApp, they're saying WhatsApp and Snapchat are the biggest platforms for sharing those sorts of things. I think probably TikTok can be added to that list now. Been through most of that actually. Been through most of that. So this is the spectrum, the table that we have now used in our framework for dealing with harmful sexual behaviours. And each of those columns are now attributed to the severity of what's happening and how seriously we take things and how we react to them, consequences. And the spectrum is normal behaviours, so things that would be appropriate for that age group, and that's divided as well, isn't it? You could argue how mature a student is in terms of what they can deal with and what they should and should be doing. So Brooks traffic light tools say that a green behaviour for 14 to 19-year-olds is masturbation. But obviously that then was in the middle of the piazza, that's a totally different thing. So what we need to do is make sure we are aware what is right and the context behind that. So that's the spectrum now that we're dealing with in terms of sexual behaviour. So normal, inappropriate, problematic, abusive and violent. Now the police and social services, we will start getting involved from problematic onwards. So we will make referrals to what is the Community Partnership Information Form with the police, or contact police directly, or contact children's services with regards to sexualised behaviour. Again, depending on context, what we know about the child, etc., etc. Which is why we've developed this. So there'll be much more of that to come as we push forward. But there'll be media on the digital screens around the school, behind toilet doors, information going home to parents, and then assembly themes, tutor time themes that will have hashtag It's Not Okay attached to it. And it's really important that starts to become a language. If there's anything in a lesson where you could be modelling where it's not okay to do things and what the right thing is to do, then please use it and then give me that example so we can add it to kind of a backup document on that. So CSE, child sexual exploitation, you need to know what this is. Again, it's in the document, Keep Children Safe in Education. I've been through it. So sexual abuse may involve physical contact, including assault by penetration, for example, rape or oral sex, and non-penetrative acts such as masturbation, kissing, rubbing, and touching outside. So those sorts of things are examples of child sexual exploitation, but obviously it can be online and as well as it can be physical. So asking for sexual images, sharing sexual images, encouraging to watch porn, those sorts of things. Examples of child criminal exploitation. Again, all the signs and symptoms we went through earlier could show this: multiple phones, expensive gifts, different friendship groups, older boyfriends, older girlfriends, arriving in cars that aren't family based. Students involved be forced or manipulated into transporting drugs or money, working in cannabis factories, shoplifting, violence towards others, and children becoming trapped through threats. That's threats to them, threats to the family, threats that if they don't carry this through or get this person involved in anything, then you'll come to harm. There were schools in the north of the county that had issues at the end of last year where adults were phoning into school to encourage students to beat up other students to pay off debts. So it's not just child to child, adults are accessing schools through phone networks as well for that sort of thing to happen. And if children are involved in that, that's a really good example of how we might be dealing with things. County lines, we've done this before, we've done quite a bit on it, we talked about language and everything a while ago. The intelligence from police locally is that actually County Lines has really settled in the area. They're really pleased with the activity, or the lack of activity in Edge End, and they've done quite a lot of work towards it. So that's a really encouraging thing to hear, but it's about drug gangs in larger cities and towns coming down, filtering through motorway networks, rail networks and things to get hold of students and young people to run drugs, sell drugs and those sorts of things in the locality. So that's County Lines. I'm really pleased to report that things have quieted down in the area for that, so that's good news. Serious violence is something else that's been highlighted in the new version, so it needs updating, so you need to know about it. And that it describes the risk factors of serious violence. So being male, frequently being absent or permanently excluded from schools or pupil referral units, experience of child maltreatment, we talked about adverse childhood experience as well, ACEs, and previous involvement in offending, or families' previous involvement in offending where they've been witness to that. So serious violence is something we also have to be considering now as well. Children missing education, you need to be aware of our processes as a school, and to be fair, these processes aren't different to most, they're not unique to us. So we have processes in our school that start with you in the classroom. We talked about attendance and punctuality at the end of last year, but students that are missing from your class you need to report. That's why the register is so important, because we need to gather patterns. So take a register in the first 10 minutes, adds into our CME processes. We then have thresholds for actions regarding absence, so if students are absent for 3 days, or for a day, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, and we follow those through as best we can. We work with them, the county, when we're starting to report them as we think they're missing in education. Nobody's seen them, we're not getting much from parents at home, and we'll work with county. So that's why reporting patterns of absence as well in your classroom is important. It may well be that someone's on a Monday has never attended your lesson, so we need to look at that as well and those sorts of things. That's a safeguarding issue. All right, so children missing education, that's our process, and you need to know about that. Prevent, I showed you on the screen earlier, please click on your prevent training. We changed slightly, we don't want everyone just to kill forests and print off their certificates and give them to a file in Claire and Fiona's office. So if you can complete the training, please, spend a bit of time doing it, between 35 and 40 minutes, depending how quick you can fast forward videos, but take time to look at them all, and then email your certificate over to HR, and we'll let you know the list of who's done them, and therefore I need that as evidence that you've all completed it. It has been updated following the updates to keep children safe in education, but it's brilliant. You can choose the scenario you look at and understand it, but it's all about preventing students at risk of radicalisation and extremism, the signs and what can be done about it. So it talks about channel panels, and we had our first invitation to a channel panel over the summer. It's cancelled, it's not needed now. But that just goes to show that students are at risk of extremism and radicalisation in this area, and that was a student you probably wouldn't put your finger on it, not that you can anyway. So channel panels are local government, cultural leaders, police, teachers, other people in education, early help up that will come together and find a solution for that one child around the panel. And it's a really powerful and really effective way of counteracting the extremism radicalisation ideals. So please have a look through that. The training link is on the members area. So this is new. This next part, recruitment and employment, that we all need to be aware of. We have to report anybody in school who we think are acting in a way that's going to put children at risk or isn't suitable. We have a duty to do that. That you didn't used to include supply teachers, funny enough. We've thrown up the agency and say, this is not quite right, this has happened today, and then they pick it up. But actually we have a duty to report that and deal with it as a school now as well, which is only right. You need to do it in the moment. You can't kind of wait till the end of the day maybe sometimes. So reporting of supply teachers and other adults working in school, so it might be community users, people you've got in, yes, the DBS check, but actually that's not appropriate at all. People to report in terms of that, and then there's subsequent action behind it. Transferable risk. Actions outside of school of teaching staff or people working with children in schools. The term transferable risk means that if you behave in a way outside of school that would then give an indication that you are at risk of working with children, and that gets reported to school, we have a duty to follow that up. I don't know how much that entails everything that happens on Facebook or things you've done 20 years ago or anything like that. All I do know is if somebody feels it's appropriate to report to school that behaviours you have displayed in the community or whatever you're doing means you are at risk of working with children, we have a duty to follow that up. And this is the other thing they cleared up in terms of allegations against staff. So you know that if you're concerned about anybody behaving in a certain way, you can go to Kerry and say that member of staff is concerned me about, or that member of the community is concerned about the way they're behaving with children. There is an allegation at a harm threshold, and there used to be just a harm threshold, but now they've added in low-level concerns. So the obvious things, behaving in a way that has harmed a child, committing an offence towards a child, behaving in a way that may suggest they shouldn't be suitable working with children, are kind of obvious things that you report in. The low-level concerns, they've now given descriptors about things that you can report as a low-level concern. And I think we need to be aware of this, because some of these things some of us might do habitually. Being over-friendly, there's no description as what that means. Sitting a child on your lap is definitely being over-friendly. Saying good morning to everyone you meet is not. So I think, you need to be clear of how you feel that is. If it's making you feel uncomfortable, it's probably right. Having favourites, I mean, I've got 3 children of my own. One of them's my favourite, they don't know that. But within a school context, it's very different, isn't it? And if you're seen to be having favourites and rewarding people in a room on their own for being your favourite, all those sorts of things, that's very different. Taking photos on own devices is really an interesting one, because we've all been in the moment on a school trip or something like that, where you think, this is why we're here. We brought this trip here and it's clicked, it's inspired them. I haven't got the school phone camera, I haven't got the iPad, there's nothing here, this moment's going to be missed, so you get your phone out and you click it. I think if that photo is then just uploaded straight away and deleted, it's very different to you having albums now with other children on your own device, but I wouldn't recommend you have albums of children on your own device, of course I wouldn't. But taking photos on your own devices habitually and often is a low-level concern. Engaging in one-to-one and secluded or isolated area, we will tell you from day one that we don't shut yourself in the room with any child. If you're working one-to-one in terms of support or something like that, it's in an appropriate environment because the door's open, it's timetable, people know you're in there. But if you're spending time on your own with children who could be vulnerable, nobody knows about that or the reasons behind it, that's a low-level concern. Excuse me. Using inappropriate, sexualised, intimidating or offensive language. We know what we shouldn't be saying to students, of course, and if that's happened, then it's a low-level concern. So those are the new things that come into recruitment, I think we all need to be really aware of. So reporting, as we said, if you're worried about anybody and their interactions with students, then you report to Kerry. If you're worried about Kerry, report to the Chair of Governors or the Chair of the local board, which is Karen Wigley, and there is a whistleblowing policy that you can follow through for that as well on the website. So, what is good practice when you are concerned? So, listen to understand. if a student comes to disclose to you, then they've chosen that moment in time with something that might be really heavy to go, I need to talk to you about this and you're the person. So it's really important that you give them that moment. Obviously, sometimes you don't know they're leading into that. One interview question we ask is what do you do if a student comes up to you and says, oh, I've got an issue at home I want to talk to you about. You need to know more context, don't you? I mean, that could be that they don't know what they're going to buy their mum for their birthday, but it could be something huge. So it's really important that you do follow through when the student says that sort of thing with what we need you to do. And I know you know this because you do it all the time. First thing you're going to do, we use TED as an easy way to remember it. Tell, explain, describe to me. But these questions are important. So first thing you're going to do is say to the child, I'm going to have to pass this on if I'm concerned or I think you're a risk. I'm just going to have to pass this on to somebody. If that student then says, okay, I'm not going to tell you, then you need to tell somebody because there's something going on there that's definitely need to follow up. Give the student your undivided attention, listen calmly and reassuringly. They've chosen you at that moment. Yeah, so you need to give them that attention. Show concern, support, but don't show emotions. That's difficult. So, some of you in here will have worked with students that have told you some pretty raw stuff. And it's hard to just switch that off and be professional, but don't react to they did what to you, that's disgusting, they should be locked up, blah, blah, blah. All those sorts of things. It's just professional and you're listening. Let them freely recall. Don't give them any sort of leading questions. And use the following questions. When did it happen? Where has it happened? What happened? Who was involved? And how did it happen? Not why, they're not going to know why something happened to them. But does Dad always do this? Does Mum do this? Does he do it only when he's drunk? Do you think he was drunk? Leading questions. Just let them tell you the facts. Because the minute you start feeding information that they can hold on to, if that does get to court, then that's where the problems lie, because that never actually happened. So I just want to briefly go, you use safeguarding building brilliantly, but I just want to, there is a slight difference between reporting a concern and receiving the disclosure. So Mark is really uncomfortable, really scruffy, he smells a bit and he says he hasn't slept all night, is reporting a concern. If a student says to you, my dad hit me last night, you just received the disclosure. And so that's when you need to perhaps dig a little bit deeper in that moment with them. Rather than just email it, well, just email it, because that's not literally what you would talk about. Rather than email just that to safeguarding, try and get a bit more information out of them in that moment, because that's the moment they've chosen to tell you. So there's a slight difference between the two. So Mark, it goes off in my ears, not there, Mrs. Chubb. So, that's now on camera. So, receiving disclosure. In the center, I overdosed, so how, what, who, and all those things, and give that information on that email address. It's not a problem at all. Be child-centered, make sure you listen to everything that's said. If you can get to write it down on time, take notes, but the important thing is to absorb what they're saying to you. Not necessarily look at the top of your head as you're taking notes, but you'll need to summarise if you can. Make them sign it, ask them to sign it and date it, because that's really important as well. You need a timestamp when that happened. If you don't get a chance to do that, fine, but immediately, as soon as you can, get to safeguarding or write all the details down on that. And copy in the DOPA, please, the relevant DOPA. That's really, really important, because quite often they hold information that they can come back and go, it's okay, we know what's happened, I've spoken to Mum this morning, and those sorts of things. And we will try and feed back to you as best we can. And then, after you've used safeguardingworld.org or spoken to the DSL about it, there are some other things you can do if nobody's about. This is on your stickers, if you've got them, you haven't got them, what's going to happen is we are reprinting everybody's cards once we've had your lovely photos into them today, and printed on the back will be all the safeguarding information, because the stickers is wear off or used, so it'll be, all of this information will be printed on the back of that card. So if you are lost at whatever it is at 4:30 on a Thursday and no one else is about, and some students come back in and said, I need to tell you this, and you can't get hold of anyone, that information's on there, okay? If you think a child's at immediate risk and no one else is about, it's 999. Rather call the police say it's okay, we can look after that. It was nothing to worry about, then the child go home if they're at risk. Just follow through what you said you'd do to the child. And then after that, after it's all happened, you get a chance to talk to somebody about it. Obviously you can't give details about a disclosure, you can't do that. What we can do is I've received something today that's pretty heavy stuff, and I need to talk to you just about how I'm feeling about it. That's absolutely the right thing to do. It's quite hard sometimes to receive disclosure, especially in the middle of a really busy day and everything else is going on. But also, what we are doing is making sure there's supervision opportunities throughout the year. So there's the DSL team up there. They're on these posters. But also, there are points throughout the year where there's supervision. You'll be invited along to that if you feel you need it. The DSL team meets to talk about some of the things that we've been doing, what went well in that, what could we have done better, and how do we feel about it. And that's really helped to just talk about it rather than just to receive disclosure. And anybody's welcome to join that if you've been through a disclosure. There are expectations of the governing body. They will be asking safeguarding questions in reviews. They should challenge you on safeguarding, and it's such a threat. I mean, it's one of the things that can shut your school down pretty quickly. So it's so important that they are reviewing it and looking at it. So expect that if you're talking to a governor, they know that they'll be in safeguarding question. And I spoke to you before about that gut feeling. If you think it's not quite right for a child, if you think, hold on a minute, they're not normally behaving like that, or they're showing some really sort of extreme views on this, and you challenge it and you're still not comfortable, then that gut feeling is important, and that's where we want you to refer, report concern, or receive the disclosure and go further. So that is pretty whistle stop in terms of safeguarding the updates. There's quite a lot, I know it's quite heavy. Please get on to Matt's our form and fill that in, because we need a register of everyone receiving training. We have to do that. I've no doubt you will smash it on a daily basis in terms of safeguarding, but we need to show that as an example. So that's the safeguarding bit. I'm going to take a second to breathe, and then we're going to go on to the behaviour bits. So there will be just one second. Have really short that. Let's kick back off again. So, we did a carousel of behaviour, we did quite a bit of welcome behaviour, and this week you've been out and about in the real world of teaching with people in front of you, young people in front of you who are absolutely desperate to get back on the horse in terms of their education, most of them, I'm sure. But the first thing is to thank you from what I apparently have become known as the uniform police to some parents, and I don't know, I think that's a little bit unfair. But we have that challenge about us challenging, and that's the right thing. It just goes to show we are challenging where they're getting it wrong. And it's been really, it's not great to be signing planners, of course it's not. But when we picked up a planner locally, it's good to see other staff picking up, putting signatures in, and I think we're slowly starting to have a real impact on how students are looking around school in terms of their uniform. I think we're starting to see that. But it's no good just doing it for 3 days. We've got to keep this going. We've got to go into next week and the week after, and October half term, when we review it, we've got to say how great that was. But after half term, we're going to kick forward and we're going to be focusing on this and this and that. And so it's really important we just keep going. And so this is why this is going to be a common thing throughout the year. It's not just at the beginning of the year I'm going to talk to you about behaviour. We're all, as a team, going to be continually doing it. But what's been great is the visibility. It's people out and about doing things, having conversations with students. We talk about conversation rather than confrontation in the carousel. I think that's been really, really nice to see. Students who I've been challenging are having a conversation with me about their uniform. They're not kind of walking away and being grunting and throwing planners at me. It's exactly the opposite. Thank you for challenging. You're doing a great job of it. Please keep doing it. Have conversations around the focus for the week and what we've been talking about, and that's really working as well. Did you see the presentation? Yes, I did. Well, we talked about respect, haven't we? Yes, we did. So let's have a conversation about that. And thank you especially for setting up your classroom standards and expectations and explicitly explaining what those are to students, because that's really, really important. You need to do that. Be explicit about what you expect from them in your classroom when they're out and about. It's so important. And make sure that they are correlating with what we're wanting as a school in terms of standards. So thank you very much for doing all those things so far. So this week we've been mostly, I don't know if you remember that sketch, I've been mostly eating, whatever. So we've been checking basic standards and we've talked about respect. So it's been really nice to hear that you've been reminding them about the theme, of respect and how we talk to each other. It's really great that we've been reminding them about expectations. Continue to do that all of the time. Put it in the language you're using with them. Keep going with what the expectations in this classroom are. That may be, but the school's expectations and my expectations are this. It's really important that carries on. Talk about constantly what we want to see rather than what we don't want to see. I'll do that through my money messages. But yeah, we want to see this. What have we talked about? And continue to follow that through. And then celebrate when we see it. It's been really great to see some students I picked up at the beginning of the week in terms of poor uniform or attitude, and that's really improved, and they're looking really smart and they've listened. It may well be because they've got three marks in their planner already, but it's sunk in. So it's great to see you like that today. It wasn't like that at the beginning of the week. I'm so pleased that you're listening. It's really good. So we've been mostly doing basic standards and talking about respect, and that's got to follow through. That can't disappear next week when we move on. That's got to be the thread that continues. We talk about how we respectfully speak to each other. So some quirks and tweaks, some quick notes. Obviously, if they're on the mug or the Ashley or they're playing football, shirt can be untucked, it's not a problem. The minute they're leaving, it's tucked in, we're back to business now. So, you know, that kind of leniency really helps. Jumpers off if it's hot, and it has been, hasn't it? I'm sweating up here now, I don't know if that's the heat. But they must be with the student in school at all times. And the reason being, there are opportunities for photos where we need people looking smart, you might meet a visitor, all those types of things that are really important. But they need their jumpers with them all the time, and the climate changes definitely. And please use the note on the uniform planner, the little square note. So if they brought a note in, sign off the top of that planner, it really helps rather than fumbling through the planners. And I've seen quite a few of those, and it's good because you can have a conversation about, oh, so next week you'll have your trainers on and sign off, because it's been signed here. So those little quirks and tweaks are fine to do. And next week, so we are going back to basics. We've had a week, so we're going to talk about what you should have done last week, and this is what we're seeing. So if you haven't got this right by now, this is really your focus. So we're going to send out a reminder. I'll do it through my presentation. It'll be in your the tutor presentation panel for Monday morning. Reminder on no-go areas and litter. That's been pretty good so far. Equipment, what they need. Uniform, again, and what they need. Punctuality, what it means to be on time is really important. And the second half of focus for next week is concentrating on the homeschool partnership. So the aim is by the end of next week, tutors, please make sure that everybody has got the homeschool partnership signed. So we're going to launch it on Monday. By the end of next week, everybody's got it signed. We're going to make that into a bit of a competition. Okay, so it's a real push. Homeschool partnership. It's in the front of the planner, on the planner pages. Get it signed. I'll be going through it with them in my presentation so they know. Because it's going to become a point of reference in future conversations. When we're meeting with parents, when we're meeting with students, this is what you signed up for. This is what Wildern's about. You agreed to that. So we can follow those up in those conversations. And if they don't sign it, and parents refuse to sign it, then we can call them in for those conversations as well. It might not be the right place. Okay, so that's behaviour and what we're doing next week. And I've overrun into Amanda's slide. Thank you. I know it's not always the most inspiring, but you're brilliant at what you do, so please keep it going and say, oh, you're back.